Dan Wright, welcome to We the Builders.
Thanks for having me on.
You're the co-founder and CEO of Armada. And
That's right.
You started the company about 4 years ago?
A little over 3.
A little over 3.
Yeah.
So walk me through the founding thesis of the company and what are the other options you had at the time? What were you doing before? What's the origin story?
So this is my third technology company, and my first 2 companies were in data and AI, broadly speaking. My first one was a company called App Dynamics that we ended up building from stealth all the way through. Cisco bought us 2 days before, almost IPO for $4 billion. And that company was all about taking businesses from brick and mortar online. So like, for a good example is you're a bank, you want to make sure that your app works correctly, because that ultimately is how much business you end up doing with your customers, right? And the same thing is true for retail and other types of things. And then I worked for an AI company called Data Robot. And while I was there, we were really focused on making AI more accessible for people who weren't PhD data scientists, people like business analysts, and creating the AI-driven enterprise was our thing.
This was before ChatGPT or
before
Anthropic Enterprise,
before XAI didn't exist.
Right.
This is before all that. And what I saw though was that AI had not actually reached operations for a lot of these companies. So like a good example is we were working with some of the large energy companies like Aramco and Chevron. And I asked them, I said, well, this is cool that we're working on all your back office stuff, but like, what are you actually doing with AI on the rigs and the refineries? Because that's where you actually make the money in those types of businesses. And they were like, well, nothing. And I was like, well, why? And the answer was really fascinating. And the answer was, number one, connectivity was a blocker. Just having reliable internet to do anything with AI is table stakes, right? The second thing was that they have a hard segregation between IT and OT for cybersecurity and data sovereignty reasons. A lot of those rigs and refineries are critical national infrastructure. So by law, they actually can't take the data off of the rigs. And also for cybersecurity reasons, their cybersecurity teams won't allow them to take it off the rigs. And then the third thing was, because of those things, they didn't have infrastructure that enabled that sort of AI to actually run on that data. The only way to do anything would actually be to bridge the digital divide, to like bring the data and the models, bring the infrastructure and the models full stack to the data in order to enable that. And then I started talking to some friends of mine. I talked to Trey Stevens over at Founders Fund. I started to talk to some of the folks at 137 Ventures, like Justin and Alex and Christian. And then also I started to talk to some of the friends that I had made at SpaceX. And I realized that we were like in this unique point in history where in the next few years, this is back in end of 2022 is when we started the company. Next few years, you were going to have connectivity everywhere. It was going to become ubiquitous by virtue of Starlink and also private 5G and other technologies, where you could have AI everywhere if you had the infrastructure. And then the second thing I saw was that you were going to have lots of data being generated at the edge, because cameras and sensors and drones and robotics are becoming mainstream now. They're used in all sorts of applications. And you've got all of these companies that have used AI in the back office saying, oh, I want to actually use it in my operations to improve it. And then I talked to my 2 co-founders. I talked to my friend John Runyon. We'd been friends for 20 years. He had taken Okta, the identity management, public identity management company. And then Pradeep Nair, our founding CTO. And Pradeep had actually helped Satya build Azure at Microsoft for a decade. He was one of the founding engineers there. He built, GovCloud, ran all of the expansion of Azure into new regions. And what we realized was that only about 30% of the world has these big hyperscale data centers. And so that 70% of the world where you're going to have the connectivity, but not the data centers, we call that the remote edge. That's like a huge opportunity where there's massive amounts of data, but there's no way to actually process that data, run AI on that data. And so the mission of Armada and kind of the core insight was, hey, we can bridge the digital divide. That's the mission of the company, and build the hyperscaler for the edge. So while the existing hyperscalers will continue to, do their thing and focus on that 30% of the world, we're focused on the 70% of the world that they're not focused on. And we're helping to make the things that people like about the hyperscalers and these big AI models run in that 70% of the world.
When is an example, I guess more recently in January, open cloud became like this phenomena, right? Like where people wanted to operate it, there's more of an edge case application. People are operating on Mac minis and there's a whole thing happening. Was that the foresight back when you were starting? You were like, okay, because of security reasons, a lot of enterprises are going to
this is way before open cloud, but what we knew was that you were going to have lots of different types of models. And we also knew a lot of people were going to compete in that area, right? Like they were going to be competing to create the best model for all sorts of different tasks, right? Like AI is really just a tool that increases productivity for humans, right? And so you'll have something for coding, you'll have something for customer support, you'll have something for sales. You're going to have models for operations. And what we wanted to do was build the infrastructure to allow an ecosystem of companies to build on top of our stack for those types of use cases. And so that was more what we saw, is that if we actually bridged the digital divide and we deployed the infrastructure on these sites, then you could take all of these models, you could fine tune them to those data sets at the edge completely securely. And then, you could create an ecosystem of builders, companies building for those different types of workflows to automate them, increase productivity.
Who are your primarily customers? Are these larger enterprises right now?
So that's another thing that's unique about Armada. We built full stack. So we do the hardware, the software, the AI. It's like AI in a box, plug and play wherever you want it. But the other thing that's unique about us is we are all in on commercial. So we sell to a lot of the largest companies in the world, like very large energy companies like Aramco and Aker BP, working with a bunch of them here in the US as well. We work with large mining companies, and we work with large manufacturing companies that want to do more with robotics, AI at the edge on their factories. And then, but we also have a whole team that's just focused on public sector, and we do a lot of work with the U.S. Navy. We were the first to deploy one of these modular data centers on a Navy ship last summer. You could see a bunch of cool videos and pictures where we're loading these things on the ship. It's being, loaded down into the weapons bay. You can process data from drones, and autonomous technologies in the middle of the ocean, run AI models. For example, we just did a reference architecture with NVIDIA and Palantir and Dell, run Palantir stuff at the edge. And then also we do a lot of work in kind of sovereign AI. So as an example, we're part of Genesis Mission, the project with the Department of Energy, where it's kind of like this AI Manhattan project where they're trying to leverage all of the decades of data from the 17 national labs around the country to improve all of our AI models so that we can leapfrog everybody else and have breakthroughs in R&D, cure diseases that have never been curable before, things like that. And then we're doing that also with allies around the world. And then we also do work in emergency response. So for example, we were the first to deploy a modular data center in the state of Alaska. We did that for emergency response, working with Alaska Department of Transportation. And they were able to cut latency to process data from drones for responding to avalanches and floods and other emergencies from 28 hours to real time. And that's only possible if you bring the data center to the data so that you're processing the data locally, and then we're running the AI on that infrastructure at the edge.
So interesting. What was the alternative for companies? Were they going to build up their own data centers? Was that what did you see happening?
Well, that was other really interesting thing. So when I was thinking about starting Armada, I had a little bit of an unfair advantage because I'd worked with a lot of these companies before, and so I could talk to people. And I was like, well, what are you doing? Like one of these large energy companies, what are you doing today on these sites? Because I knew that they had to deploy infrastructure locally, and what they were doing was very siloed, and it was totally DIY. It was like, I'm going to do everything myself. They had a bunch of servers in a closet. There's something called on a lot of rigs, there's something called the rig man's house. It's like the person who actually operates the rig. They would just throw some GPUs in there. It's a fire hazard. So what I realized was like, this is never going to scale.
Yeah.
One. So it's going to have to be a different approach. And then the second thing is it was very siloed by site.
It was also probably limited utility for them.
Yeah. You can only do so much, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you wanted to run one small model, sure. Right. But if you want to do like many different AI workloads, because a lot of these companies, they want to do fully autonomous rigs, fully autonomous mines over the next few years. You're never going to be able to do that unless you deploy more infrastructure at the edge. And then by doing it as part of a unified platform, it's much easier to improve your models and do things like federated learning, right? I can take these latest models, I can push them down, run them securely on the sites, fine tune them to my data on the sites, and then I can send the refined model back and use that to improve my operations at all of my sites.
Can you say more about this unified platform? Because you said you have the hardware, you have the software.
Yeah.
What is the software layer, and what does that enable you to do as a customer?
So we built the idea, the vision for the company was to be the hyperscaler for the edge, right? So the hyperscaler for that 70% of the world. And so we built it as a hyperscaler. So we built it full stack, the same way Microsoft and Amazon and Google and Oracle did 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And we did it with an idea that there would be an ecosystem of different AI and software applications that we would want to enable to run on our stack. And I think that was a big lesson from the hyperscalers, was that if you actually look at when they really started to explode in terms of their growth and also where a lot of their margins came from, it came from having different people build solutions on top of their stack. And it's sort of like the iPhone, right? The app store on the iPhone, where like every time, a new solution is built on Microsoft stack, they make money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so like they're basically selling picks and shovels to do those sorts of things. And we wanted to be in a similar business, but focus on the 70% of the world. And so we built a fleet of a line of modular data centers.
Also 70% of the profit margin?
Yeah. We built a line of modular data centers called galleons. A galleon's like a ship. The idea being that these would sail to the data rather than having the data have to sail to the faraway data center. And they come in different sizes. There's one that's as small as a suitcase called a beacon. On the flip side, there's one that's about 2 megawatts called Leviathan. And then there's every size in between, or there's lots of sizes in between. And so each of these things is like a node to a distributed cloud. And then we have a software operating system that we call AEP, which stands for Armada Edge Platform. And on top of that platform, there's a marketplace where you can take different software and AI applications. You can push it, run it locally at the edge, right? And so I mentioned, more established companies like Microsoft or one of the other cloud providers or Palantir. We can take those things, we can run them locally. But then you also think about some of these new AI models that are coming out. Even like OpenAI, we announced a partnership with them last year, run, their model at the edge. Really anything that you would want to run, you can run at the edge. And then the other nice thing about it is a lot of our customers have their own models that they built. And so by building it in this way, we actually allowed them to publish first in a private marketplace, which is their own marketplace in our platform, their own models to be able to push them down to run at all of their different sites. And then if they create something really valuable because they've used all of their own proprietary data and they want to publish that publicly,
and commercialize it.
They can commercialize it and create new revenue streams. And a lot of these companies do want to do that, right? Like for example, Aramco's got a arm of their business called ADC, Aramco Digital Company. And that's the whole idea, is that they're going to train models on their own proprietary data. They've got more data about energy than anybody in the world.
Yeah.
And then they will commercialize that with every other energy.
And then you've had experience working with energy companies through your previous work. And so you go to, if you end up working with any other energy company, you're like, oh, hey, like Aramco has developed this model. You can use this, but Palantir also, gives you an option. You can work with OpenAI. You have like this suite of options on the platform that you can try and test or build your own if
that's
it
right.
doesn't work for you.
And the nice thing is what that allows us to do is solve lots of different problems without having to build everything ourselves, right? We're creating an ecosystem, and then you also get network effects, right? Like if you have other people that make money when your product is deployed, then they're selling for you, right?
No, that's what I was thinking. So it's you have like almost these joint ventures within the ecosystem as you're starting out. But
even like some of these new model companies, they'll come to us and say, hey, I want to access a new market, but I can't wait for one of the hyperscale data centers to get built. I heard that you can deploy in days. Can I, buy one and deploy it? And we're like, sure.
So I'm guessing you're starting to get more inbound for the platform as well now. And
that's right.
Is it like, it's not as similar to the Apple App Store that in the sense that it's not a developer ecosystem, but it's an ecosystem of model providers, right? And so these are companies who've built models for specific use cases or platforms for specific use cases.
It's both. So like a lot of the kind of traditional industry partners are also partnering with us. So as an example, we have a partnership with Halliburton.
Sorry? Halliburton.
Yeah. So Halliburton has a suite of applications. It's called their landmark applications. And those are widely used by energy companies to do things like automating production processes to extract oil, right? And rather than reinvent the wheel, try to build something like that, because they've been doing that for decades. Instead, what we said is, hey, we'll partner with Halliburton, but we're going to extend that to run in these more remote sites where it could never run before because there was no infrastructure. And we can do the same thing with Schlumberger and Weatherford and all these other ones. And we can do the same thing. Like there's another one that's very popular in mining and in emergency response. It's like geospatial mapping technology. It's called Esri. We integrated with that. Okay, I can do geospatial mapping in real time at the edge on the site, which speeds up exploration. It also, speeds up emergency response. And so those types of use cases, we bring in the industry specific partners, but then yes, also like the model companies. And then what's really exciting to us is we're starting to see like startups build on top of our stack. And we're going to be investing a lot in that area. Like we want lots and lots of startups building new applications on top of our stack. And one of the big like milestone moments for me that I'm looking forward to is going to be when we have the first like unicorn that builds on top of our stack. That'll be a good moment. I mean, like even
I hope you start taking equity in some of these.
We don't have a venture fund yet, but it's not to say we won't at some point.
That is really fascinating.
Yeah.
So, okay, walk me through the next 5 years. What is this? Where do you see this platform becoming, or where does the
future
look
like I said,
like?
we've been around for a little over 3 years. We've grown incredibly fast.
What has enabled that like hyper growth?
I think it's just that confluence, the convergence of those three trends that I mentioned. It's like one, all these new places are going online due to Starlink and other, LEO and GEO satellite providers, as well as private 5G. And we're just like fast following them. It's like, oh, a new country just lit up Starlink. Let's start selling to that country.
Yeah.
Right. And we're a first mover. And that's one. The second thing is, there's all this data that's sort of trapped at the edge. Gartner has a great stat that says, I think it's by 2028, 80% of data is going to be generated at the edge. So most of the data is going to the edge. And that's because there's just huge amounts of sensors that are deployed on these sites. And then they're using drones, they're using more robotics, and all of them want to go towards autonomy over the next few years. And so that demands that you have to do local data processing. There's no other way to do that in these more remote locations. And so that's another big driver. And then the third thing is just the rise of AI, right? As people are doing more with AI on their phones, people are using, I told you XAI didn't even exist when we started the company. Now people are using Grok, they're using Claude, and Claude didn't exist, right? Now they're using all these things that didn't exist before, and they're saying, how do I actually get that type of productivity gain, but do it in my operations versus just the back office or just with my knowledge workers? And so we're able to, kind of take those tailwinds and then continue to grow on a hyper growth way. And right now, in terms of where I see the next 5 years, we're really trying to continue to expand our reach globally. For example, we started out, in the Americas, focused on, kind of North and South America. And then we went to the Middle East, and that part of the world's growing very fast for us. We work with some of the largest companies there. We're also helping out with the public sector, even with the Iran war. We helped a key ally that needed our technology. We were able to deploy within weeks or within days, sorry, not even a week. And that was very high value. So then they ordered more, right? But now we're starting to go into Europe. We just announced a partnership with Aker BP, which is one of the big energy companies in Norway. They're going to deploy these on offshore rigs in the North Sea. Super cool. Going towards full autonomy in those rigs. Yeah. We're going to be moving more into Europe. And the reason is that there's a big focus on sovereign AI. And that's the other thing that Armada does is it enables you not only to get those models, but to run them with full sovereignty down to the site level in a way that nobody else does. And so Europe's a big focus. And then Asia Pac, we just announced a big deal in Australia with a company called WinDC. We're deploying our Leviathans, initially 10 megawatts of our Leviathans. And then they're scaling up into the hundreds of megawatts and then gigawatts. And so that's another big focus for us is Australia. And there's also a lot of energy. There's oil and gas and mining in Australia. So it's a good one. And there's a lot of land, right?
That is fair. Do you take on would you also take on the data? If there's a larger demand, would you be taking on the infrastructure build up off that and provide the entire solution, or do you leave that onto the customer? And
so our whole pitch to a customer is what I call the 3 S's: speed, scale, and sovereignty. So speed being that we can deploy in days versus years or months. We also can scale up with demand, and WinDC is actually a really good example of that, where we're starting with 10 megawatts. They already have demand in the hundreds of megawatts, so then we're going to be scaling with them to the hundreds of megawatts and then beyond. So being able to scale up versus having to wait years and then you potentially overbuild or build the wrong thing. And then the sovereignty piece is very important because a lot of these countries, they're focused on, hey, I want my own sovereign AI. And even companies are like, I want my own sovereign AI factory where I can fine tune all of the latest models, but on my data, and then keep it as my secret sauce. That's my most valuable asset, right? Or if I'm going to publish it, I want to get paid for it. So I can do it in my marketplace, right? And so that is really kind of the focus for us is how do we continue to partner with our customers at every stage and then grow with them as they do more with AI and also as they look to maybe monetize some of their models with third parties.
This is very interesting. I didn't realize the full scale of how Armada was operating. As you bring on startups to the platform, I guess let's step back a little. Why did you? What is the insight behind going for the energy and mining companies? Do they have the most data on edge? Is it just more advanced robotics and sensors?
I think that the core insight there was that their whole business is that the money making is from producing things at remote sites, right? Energy companies, especially these large energy companies, if their upstream business is down or if it's not working perfectly or if they're not producing as much as they can, it has a huge impact on the business. Same with the mining sites. And the same is true, obviously, in a national security scenario. There, you're not talking about money so much as lives, right? And the same in an emergency response scenario. And a lot of these happen in very remote areas. And because of the importance of the things that happen at those remote sites, and then the fact that they have a lot of those remote sites, there is a massive amount of data that we can sort of unlock to create a ton of value for those customers. So that was more our focus is, number one, where are the top organizations in the world that have a large number of remote sites that are generating large amounts of data without a good way to process that data? And then the other thing that we looked for is, okay, out of all those countries or all those companies, all those organizations, what ones actually have the most sensitive data, where they're not going to want to send all that data to the cloud, even if they could, because of data sovereignty and data security.
In large part, was that why so much of data was going underutilized, like maybe 70% or whatever that is, because it's way hard to retrieve that data,
it's really two things. So one is that so the data security, data sovereignty concerns, like the data that we're talking about, like an energy company's data that's on an oil rig, that's like their crown jewels data. It's too sensitive. And a lot of countries, those rigs and refineries are classified as critical national infrastructure. So they actually can't take the data off the site. And so that's one big driver. The second big driver is that the utility of data goes down massively as time goes on. Data is most valuable at the instant that it is generated. And if you have, minutes or hours or days go, sometimes it's completely worthless. Like a good example of this is what we're doing in Alaska, right? If we are able to, in the moment, say, hey, there's a distressed person over there that you don't see, you need to go save them, to a first responder, that's immensely valuable. That's everything. But if you got that same insight more than a day later, it's probably completely worthless, or it could be completely worthless, right? And in some scenarios, we deal with situations where there's like weeks of latency. Like, for example, we work with some of these energy companies, and they send people out, or they have sent people manually out to inspect their wells and their rigs. And oftentimes they're inspecting for like leaks, like leak detection, and weeks will go by and they don't spot it until it's been leaking for weeks, right? And so if you're able to spot those things in real time, you can not only reduce emissions, but you can increase production, because a lot of them are capped on the amount of oil that they can produce based on their emissions. And so you're helping them on both sides. And then in addition to that, you're helping them with their cost profile, because they're not having to people to manually do things. One of our customers, I really like what the CEO says. He says, we make the computers do the work, make the computers go out to all of those wells. If you look in the Bakken or in the Marcellus or the North Slope of Alaska or the Permian, there's thousands and thousands of wells. And it's just not efficient to have people manually go out and search all of those wells. And then once you get on there, you realize there's so many of these other tasks that can be automated. Another good example is that by regulation, they have to prepare a well report every 12 hours. And this is something that's like manually done by a human to record everything that happens on the well. You can just use a large language model if you tune it to the data that you have on that well, and they can do that automatically. And then a human can just kind of like check it. Much more efficient.
Very interesting. Well, the other thing I'm curious about is, the company has scaled pretty fast in about 3 years, right? You mentioned you raised about 230 odd million in your recent round as well. Congratulations on that. So how have you managed that scale internally within the company, and whether that's hiring, maintaining culture? How do you think about culture?
Great question. I mean, I told you when we started the company that the first thing we did is we sat down, me and John and Pradeep, my co-founders, and we wrote down the mission, vision, values of the company. That was the first thing we did before we hired anybody. And then we said, okay, we're not going to just have this be like words on paper. We're going to actually have this be how we operate. And we meant it. So like on the front end, when we hire people, we're very, very difficult in terms of people getting in. Like, I think some people just get exhausted with our hiring process, but we make it intentionally very hard to get in. And I tell everybody that I interview, and I interview a lot of people about joining Armada, it's like, you got to be top 1% in the world at what you do. And you have to not just tell me that, you actually have to demonstrate it with facts from your background. Then you have to be all in on the mission. And you not only need to tell me that you're all in on the mission, you need to tell me why. Like, why does it actually matter? And I have to believe you. And then the third thing is you have to be able to work really hard, because that's what it takes to accomplish the mission. I mean, we're trying to build the hyperscaler for the edge. It's a really hard thing to do. We need people who are all in. And we don't just make it really hard for people to get in by like monitoring those things and testing for them. On the front end, we actually evaluate all of our employees and ourselves on an ongoing basis, saying, hey, are we making the cut? And then if the answer is no, we don't mess around. We just tell people, hey, it's not a fit, because we told you what the expectations were when you joined and you're not living up to it, and no hard feelings. We wish you well, but this is not the right place for you. And we're not.
Are you a fan of work
We're not shy
trials?
about doing that. Yeah, I mean, so I think that those can have a place, but I also think that if you don't have like super high conviction, like if you don't leave an interview feeling like I need to hire this person, you probably shouldn't be hiring them in the first place.
Where do you stand on like take maybe months and build a relationship or figure out?
We do that all the time. I'm also like, there's people that I've been talking to for years that we've either just hired or that we're in the process of hiring. I do that all the time. And I find that like sometimes those people come to work for us. Sometimes they go build a super interesting company that partners with us. Like there's a lot of ways that can benefit. So yeah, I always try to be on the lookout for like great talent and then build a relationship. And then sometimes it ends up that they join.
And how big is the team now?
We got about 400 employees.
Oh, wow.
And this year we'll grow substantially again. A lot of those employees are up in Bellevue outside of Seattle. It's our largest office, but we have people in the Bay Area where I live. We have an office in the Presidio. We also have a office we have people in Texas. We have people in DC. We have a pretty large office in the UAE, which is kind of a big international hub for us. We have people in India. So we're expanding. We have people in Europe. We have people in Europe now, including Norway and Amsterdam and other places. So we're a global company.
Well, that's awesome. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
We had limited time today, but hope to, continue the conversation. I had a lot more questions, and I think like this is one of the most interesting companies of this year that I've sort of interviewed.
Thank you. Well, yeah, really enjoyed the conversation, and look forward to talking again soon.
Right.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.